dozen teams already rolled through Indianapolis for Big Ten Media Days. Another half dozen more, because, baby, that's just life in the new 18-team B1G. Big Ten Media Days from Lucas Oil Stadium as we get set to hear from Michigan, Oregon, Washington, Minnesota, Indiana, and Maryland preparing for a big season in the Big Ten. And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Bud Elliott, that's Danny Cannell, that's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live on CBS Sports Network. For the next 2 hours, we'll be bringing you coverage of Day 3 here at Big Ten Media Days. We are scheduled to be joined by Washington head coach Jedd Fisch, Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore, and Oregon head coach Dan Lanning. But before we get into our Day 3 attendees, wanted to take a spin around some of the news and the reaction, because we've had a great chance to be able to talk to a lot of the brightest minds in sports media here at Lucas Oil Stadium and around Indianapolis. And one of the pieces of news that our own Dennis Dodd has been reporting on is the upcoming House settlement. And so, Bud, got to throw it to billable hours here. You know, everybody from the tailgate that rocks with us understands that, you know, as our in-house attorney and counsel, you're able to provide some clarity here. So, the House settlement, has to do with multiple billions of dollars and really setting up the future of college athletics. One notable item that I think will impact college football in a way that we might be able to understand is a new scholarship limit. The reporting right now from Dodd and others says that the new scholarship limits as part of this settlement will be 105 scholarships. Why do we arrive at that number, and what's the impact going to be?
I think ultimately what they're going to do here is they're going to get rid of walk-ons, and they want to set a hard cap on how many players you can carry on your roster. And what was happening is that some schools with a lot of NIL money were carrying like maybe 105, 115 kids who weren't on scholarship, but they were on the payroll, so to speak.
I gotcha.
So they kind of want to make it a little more fair and standardized for everybody as we kind of get into this revenue-sharing mold. Now, the key thing here, not every school will carry 105 scholarship kids. And as we talked about before show, these are equivalency scholarships, so you can go ahead and give them, an eighth or a quarter or a 16th or whatever you want to, but it'll be 105 hard now.
I think the thing that's always interesting is this happens all the time in our business, the unintended consequences, that we don't always see coming, and yet we can talk about it now, is what does this do with those 20 extra scholarships, because they're going to go for 85 to 105. What does that do to the trickle-down effect to the Group of 5 level of those schools, which would a lot of times snatch up some of those guys? Yeah, exactly.
My thing was blowing up last night.
Exactly.
They were not happy.
Exactly, because I think it's only going to continue to separate, and that gap that already exists is only going to get wider as they're able to snatch up some of that talent that they might have lost because they couldn't give them a full ride, they couldn't give them a scholarship. Now they can. And so a lot of times those guys may go to a lower level, Group of 5, and now they're just going to stay at the elite level and take a spot at Oklahoma, Ohio State, Florida State, wherever it is.
It'll also be interesting, too, to see how this impacts the way that the schools recruit as far as where they're doing the recruiting. Because we've already seen a trend with the addition of the transfer portal that a lot of programs are putting more of their focus in recruiting into the portal. Is it going to keep going that way now? I mean, you're the recruiting expert, so I'd love to know what you think on this one. Are we going to see fewer high school recruits really getting offers now?
I actually think that this will lead to more high school recruits getting offers because you have more roster space to play with. There are a lot of kids that every big-time program is going to evaluate every year. They're like, we like him, but do we love him? And what we really need to see, especially with the line of scrimmage, is he going to hit that growth spurt at 19, at 19 and a half years of age, right? And, birthdays matter a lot come recruiting, but we need to answer the question, when we start feeding this kid 8,000 calories a day, and we lift him 6 or 7 times a week, is he going to blow up? And now they're going to be able to take 5 or 6 additional line of scrimmage prospects. And the ones who grow will stay. And the ones who don't, guess what? Those are your new G5 players. They'll be trickling down to all the G5 schools.
And as part of the House settlement, we are talking about a college football world where payments are being made to all 105 of these players. We talk about the talent separation that might happen because of this. I mean, Danny, I've got to think that based on the financials, we know there is such a gap in terms of the revenue that is dispersed from the very top conferences to, conferences that are technically still at the FBS level and sharing the same space and have access to the same college football playoff as everyone else. Is that sort of what you're foreseeing in terms of even more of a separation between the haves and the have-nots?
Yes, which I think eventually leads us down to a road where the group of 5 teams even get their own playoff, because they're going to be like, what are we doing trying to compete? We are a completely different model. We cannot compete with this. Because remember, there has been a shift even in the last 3 years or so from the group of 5 coaches who forever would say, we want a seat at the table. We want a chance at that championship, even knowing deep down inside they probably didn't have a real chance. Now they're more likely to say, and we've heard more coaches say, we're playing a different level than they are. So I think that's even more likely to happen sooner rather than later, is a split off officially, and then all of a sudden you'll see the group of 5 have their own playoff, and the Power 4 will have theirs.
Yeah, I do think that's what this pushes us further towards. We've talked about the kind of 2 Super League professional model that the Big Ten and SEC have been kind of pushing toward, and I think this is another step toward that, where you're kind of regulating roster size now. It's not an actual salary cap, but it's kind of an unofficial salary cap that each program now has. So I think it's just another step in that direction for the sport.
Another thing to consider here, like I was talking a couple years ago to a buddy of mine who was a director of player personnel at a G5, and he's like, dude, you realize we don't carry 85 scholarship players as of now. We're at 77. Like, our administration is not going to pay for 85. There's no way, guys, they're not going to pay for 105 at the G5 level in most spots. Like, maybe like
Liberty.
I could see a Boise, a Liberty, maybe a Tulane, like a Memphis now with the FedEx money probably, but we're talking about a very small handful of schools at the G5 level who would actually pay to exceed even the old cap of 85. And I'd be shocked. Maybe Liberty, because Liberty is loaded. But I don't think we're going to see hardly any G5 schools go to 105 full scholarships.
So yesterday at the desk, one of the coaches that joined us and mentioned NIL very quickly was UCLA head coach DeShaun Foster, in terms of some of the ways that he's been able to change the outlook for UCLA, some of the changes that need to happen. Now, DeShaun went a little viral for his opening statement. And I think that one thing that we can be able to share is the full story here, because Brandon Marcello and John Talty wrote a great story for CBSSports.com, and at the availability behind us when he got to talk to reporters, he was almost laughing it off. He said, I hadn't seen it yet, but yeah, like it was a moment. You just froze. It's a big stage up there. We're in a huge stadium. We've actually got a clip from DeShaun with us on the show. I thought that he gave great insight into what we should expect from the Bruins. What do you want people to think about when they think of the identity of DeShaun Foster's UCLA Bruins?
It's basically going to be my pillars. It's going to be discipline, respect, and enthusiasm. So if you cut on a game, and you should be able to see that win, lose, or draw, you should be able to go out there and see on my team, like, that team is disciplined, they play with respect, and they're having fun. So that's the number one I'm just preaching. I want guys to get out there and have fun, man. This is a game. It's a fun game, It's the ultimate team game, so have fun doing it.
I mean, Danny, he was so much more than that one viral moment of freezing up on stage. There's almost a humanity to the way he was able to embrace it and bounce back.
I thought it was on his handlers. Yeah. I thought he looked like they did not prep him for it. Now, he might have just froze and they had a plan in place, but it looked like they had no plan, because Tom and I were talking earlier, every coach on here, they kind of like went through a script almost. It was like, thank the family, thank your kids, thank the athletic director, thank everybody for being here, and then you talk about the players that you brought, and then it's like, okay, questions. Like, they all followed a script. It's like he wasn't given the script. So I put it some on his handlers. Clearly, it was not a shining moment for DeShaun Foster, but here's what I think. If the season falls apart, it's going to haunt him. If he wins, and even if he gets 6 or 7 wins, which I think is probably a reasonable expectation, we can probably forget about it and it won't be a thing. The thing I worry about is if the season comes unraveling a little bit, that'll be harder to overcome for him, because they'll be like, remember that guy, looks like he doesn't know what he's doing, which is unfortunate, but that's the first impression always matters, and unfortunately that was the first impression.
Also, if you watched it live, and we can see it here on our set, he's looking over at who I assume is the moderator, I think waiting for that guy to say, all right, we're opening up to questions now. So I think that was part of the awkward pauses, too. Like, it's hard to see on just the viral clip, but if you watch it live, it's like he's clearly looking over, waiting for the guy to say something about questions opening up, which is typically kind of how it goes.
Yeah, and it's just a shame, honestly, because the way social media and everything works now, we're a big part of the world. The only thing anybody is really seeing was the opening press conference. But having him here on the desk with us on the show yesterday, I thought he was great. I thought he was great in his media availability. And it's just, the one thing everybody notices, though, is the one thing that was wrong.
Who I thought, and it didn't go viral, but I thought he bombed, and I remember kind of ripping him, was David Braun at Northwestern. He was thrust into the role, didn't have coaching experience.
It's about last year.
Yes, last year at his intro, he looked nervous, he looked overwhelmed, and then what did he do? He went and crushed it. it. Like, so you can take this a little bit with a grain of salt that it doesn't matter what do those players think. And if he's able to go back there, that I think is his best messaging. If he goes back and he has fun with the players and he kind of laughs about it and he's able to just put it behind him, which seems like the attitude he's taken,
right.
I think that's the right approach. But all that matters is do those players buy into his philosophy, his mentality, his plan, and if they do that, it'll all work out.
And in the response, the word that sort of came to mind and also has come out from the reporting is authentic.
Yeah.
That, you know, I'm me. Yeah, like I'm not the best stand up here and like run a political rally. You know, you're not seeing DeShaun Foster 2024. You know, trying to go out there and like win over delegates.
It could have been worse. It could have been Adam Gase at his New York Jets opening presser, and it wasn't that.
You can always be Adam Gase. Never go full Adam Gase. All right, coming up on the other side, going from UCLA to the two Big Ten newcomers that are here in Indianapolis today. What is the transition going to look like for the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies? We'll get into all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network from day 3 of Big Ten Media Days here in Indianapolis. And two of the attendees that we have for today is going to be the two teams from the Pac-12 that were playing an instant classic on Friday night of Conference Championship weekend. Two teams that had been competing for those final Pac-12 titles on their way out. That would be the Oregon Ducks and the Washington Huskies. We are scheduled to be joined by both head coaches, Dan Lanning and Jedd Fisch, a little bit later on in the show. So I don't want to spoil our questions for anybody, but, you know, Tom, when you think about the adjustment, let's say for Oregon first, because I would say that there's so much more continuity there, even though we've got a lot of transfer portal activity, a lot of recruiting classes are going to be counted on to provide real depth. What do you think that fit is going to look like as Oregon has to take on the Big Ten, but also as the Big Ten has to take on Oregon?
Yeah, I think of the 4 schools that are joining the league this year, Oregon is in the best position, is best equipped right now to compete right away. And obviously everybody feels that way. They're all being picked to finish second in the league behind Ohio State. But you just look at the team that Lanning has built with the Ducks in his years there. They've been recruiting very well, but where they have really recruited and developed well is along the lines of scrimmage. So they're coming into this league with a very strong offensive line, a very strong defensive line. So, you know, the mystique of Big Ten physical play, that's nothing to Oregon. Oregon's been playing physical for the last few years. There's not going to be any adjustment. You look at some of the skill position talent they have. They bring in Evan Stewart from Texas A&M to pair him with Tez Johnson. So they've got excellent receivers. They've got the most experience at quarterback probably in the league with Dylan Gabriel coming in and transferring from Oklahoma. This is a team that has talent and experience, and they've been there, but they haven't finished the job yet. So they've still got that little chip on their shoulder or a giant inflatable duck floating in the river. And I think that bringing all that in, I mean, yes, there's the travel aspect, there's the learning the new opponents and all that thing that comes with the move, but I just feel like this team is prepared to come in from day one and be very competitive in this league.
It's interesting. These two teams, one has massive expectations, the other has none. You know, and the one that has none is the team that was playing in the national championship game. It's kind of wild, but you nailed it. I mean, they're a team that feels like they're knocking on the door and they want to bang it down. You know, they want to finally push through and take this program to the next level. Feels like the coach is perfect. I mean, is there a hotter coach in the country than Dan Lanning? No. I don't mean physically good looking.
He is
attractive.
Man.
But he is. I mean, Alabama was in the market. You know, there's a lot of speculation about that almost happening. But and it makes a lot of sense. He's crushed it in the recruiting trail. I think he's younger, so he relates really well to the players. He's a great motivator. He's done a phenomenal job building this roster, and it does feel like it's culminating in what could be a true breakout season for the Ducks. Not to mention they get Ohio State, that other team, at home in their backyard. They might have to beat them twice, though. That's the reality of it. But I think this roster is stacked and ready to go. It makes complete sense why they're picked to be at least the top 2 team.
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the highest odds to make the playoff for a reason. I think you can judge by their actions, right? Lanning not taking the Alabama job, that has to tell you something about how much he likes this roster. You know, they went out and they had a shopping spree in the portal, but not a ton of guys. Like, they already liked the roster quite a bit. They went and got Derek Harmon from Michigan State. He wasn't cheap. They went and got Caldwell from Houston. He wasn't cheap. It's like, oh, cool. We got 2 guys that are probably, I don't know, top 100, top 150 picks to play D-tackle. Great. we feel better. So I think they're extremely well prepared for the Big Ten because they have some of the best big men in the Big Ten.
When Kirby Smart, who was the head coach, when Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator at Georgia, when he's at SEC Media Days and he's talking about NIL, and he says, I would love to have that NIL to Lanning, Scott. But is there some truth to that? Is this a operation that, in terms of the amount of money and then also the way that they evaluate, the way that they spend, are they running that game as well as, if not better than anybody in the country?
They are the Yankees of college football right now.
That's great.
I don't really think.
Not Ohio State?
No, I think Oregon has more money than Ohio State. And I think their operation is extremely streamlined, in terms of, who the donors are. The people who run their collective are really professional. It's old Nike guys. They've done marketing before. They understand how this works. And it's not just NIL, right? Lanning is a relentless recruiter by himself, and he's got a lot of guys on that staff who are really good recruiters. They would still land kids without having a checkbook, but they also got a great checkbook. So when you put that combination together, they could have the number one class in the country this year on the high school trail too, which is absurd considering how little talent the Pacific Northwest produces at the upper levels of college football.
What about the challenge for Washington and Jedd Fisch? Danny, you just saw, we had at one point, I believe Bud had the depth chart from the national championship game. Yep. We were just drawing red lines through every single starter that was gone. You had some of them leave because they had 9 6th-year seniors. You had some of them leave because they declared early for the NFL draft. You had one of your best defensive backs go to Oregon. Yep. It is a very difficult challenge for the Huskies. You mentioned no expectations, but we've always got to set an expectation. What do you think Jedd Fisch is going to be able to do with Washington this year?
I think they're kind of similar to what we saw with TCU, who had that perfect culmination. They came all together, got to the national championship game, came up short. Now, Washington was more competitive than TCU was, but the next year you saw a reflection of all the talent that was lost. It was a shell of the team it used to be. There's only 3 returning starters on this roster. There is not much talent that's there. Then Sonny Dykes, at least he had this coaching staff come back, or most of it. And now you've got Jedd Fisch coming in, totally revamping the staff, trying to put together a roster. And I think this year will be a, let's go bowling season. 7 wins maybe is a really good season. But I feel like that should be the expectation with the amount of players that they lost, including a quarterback who was phenomenal. They bring in Will Rogers, who has a wealth of experience. Tom and I we were talking before the show and saying, man, I wonder what the expectation would have been if he could have gotten Noah Fafita to come with him and Tedero McMillan, a couple of his players for Arizona. They didn't, but at least they got somebody who's played a lot of football against some of the toughest defenses in the country. I think that brings some stability, but I think it is going to be more of a rebuild, kind of lay a foundation type of year for Jedd Fisch.
The thing that stands out to me, the unofficial Big Ten media poll for the predictions, Washington, we're talking about them. They were in the title game last year. They had a shot to win the national championship. They're picked behind Rutgers. They're picked to finish 10th in this league, and Rutgers is 9th. And that is it's one of those mind-boggling things that I can't really wrap my brain around, but it also makes sense because, as Danny went over, there is a lot of change on this roster. The Washington Huskies you see take the field in week 1 this year will not look like the team that took the field against Michigan in the title game. Penix is gone. They lost 3 NFL receivers. They lost their entire offensive line. Everybody's pretty much having to wear a name tag around that facility this offseason so people could learn who their teammates are. But it is an interesting situation for Jedd Fisch because this isn't the first time Jedd's been in this situation.
Sure, yeah.
He took over that Arizona program from Kevin Sumlin that went winless in the COVID season and went 1-11 in year 1. And then it was 5-7. And then last year they won 10 games. So Jedd Fisch is not new to this game. He's in a better situation, but it's still a rebuild.
I went through this morning just kind of win-loss, and I have them at 3-9.
Woohoo!
Now look, they're not.
That seems like a floor.
They're not going to go 3.
That's got to be a floor. Yeah.
So, but there are 11 losable games on this schedule. They will be favored. Well, no, 10 because they'll beat Eastern Michigan. They'll beat Weber State. But everybody else, are they better than Washington State? I don't know. They lost more than Washington State did. Are they going to win at Indiana, at Rutgers? 10th in that media poll. That might be very optimistic. But I think I'll improve my opinion of this team once we start reading some of these fall camp reports because they did have to add so many players late in the cycle. They had a pretty aggressive, post-spring portal window. And I'm curious to see how all the pieces fit together. The spring game, it looked rough, but they didn't have anybody who could snap the ball, right? I do love the receivers. Boston and Hunter on the outside are really nice pieces. They lose Muhammad, the stud corner, to Oregon, so that hurts. But Will Rogers played a lot of football. I think they will have a shot to make a bowl But that scared me when I was like, okay, win-loss, 3-9, okay.
You're underestimating the power of Belichick running the defense. Steve Belichick running that.
Yes, that's a good point.
Also, you know what made this even more challenging was a lot of times you take over a program, it's struggling, you can get hired in December, get at least some sort of recruiting class together last minute. I mean, this was a later hire because Nick Saban retires January 10th. Kalen DeBoer leaves a little bit later. So you kind of started a little bit behind already what was going to be a massive rebuild. So I think there's a lot of challenge that Jedd Fisch is going to take. I just think it's going to take some time.
I also think this roster is probably slightly better than the smoking crater that he took over from Kevin Sumlin in Arizona.
Yeah.
Very
like,
much.
So Jedd Fisch, to your point, he's got experience dealing with really, really kind of shaky roster situations before.
And those early Arizona teams, they didn't win a lot of games. But, Tom, what did they do?
They played hard.
They played hard. I'm very serious about that. A great job of being able to coach them up, and they're going to need it with all the exits that they had there at Washington. Well, coming up on the other side, it's not the only two teams that we have. So, let's take a look under the hood at a Minnesota, at a Maryland, and another new hire, Indiana head coach Curt Cignetti. We'll get into all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network from Big Ten Media Days in Lucas Oil Stadium. We've got Oregon, Washington, but look, the rookies, that's not going to take over all of our focus because we're also going to get to hear from the reigning national champions, Michigan, in addition to a scheduled interview with Sherrone Moore coming up a little bit later on in the show. But when we look at some of a Maryland, when we look at a Minnesota, or Tom, when we look at Indiana, because Curt Cignetti, new hire, just like a Jedd Fisch or like a Sherrone Moore, made a lot of waves when it came to getting up there on the microphone at halftime of the basketball game talking about where Indiana stood and next to the rest of the Big Ten. Newsflash, if you haven't seen it, he's not afraid of anybody. And
they're going to beat Ohio State.
Yeah,
they're going to.
That's what he said. And you even said, listening to Coach Sig, it feels like you're ready to run through a wall. All right, now let's look a little bit deeper. What does he have to do for Indiana to take some steps forward here in year one?
Well, I think that he's bringing with him a history of winning and culture that he brings with James Madison because he did a fantastic job with that program. And I think Indiana, we have seen flashes. They have had seasons, whether it was under Kevin Wilson at times and with Tom Allen. They had good years, but they were never really able to find the consistency. That's what he needs to bring to Indiana, and I think how he's going to do that is by raising the talent level. And because Indiana, for the most part in recent years, with their recruiting classes, they're always been a team that they have like one guy on defense who's awesome and one guy on offense who's awesome, and then everybody else is just a guy. But I think Cignetti has already started a talent infusion into this program, because if you look at their depth chart going into the season, it's a whole lot of new names. This is very much a rebuild, but it's a lot of talented names.
Isn't it a lot of JMU, too?
Yeah, there's plenty of JMU, but there's also plenty of Ohio, which, remember, Ohio was a wagon last year.
That's right.
They brought in Curtis Rourke, the quarterback, who I think is a very experienced and a very talented player, and he's also dynamic. He can use his legs. He's not an elite arm strength guy, but he's got enough juice in the ball to make all the throws. He's brought in a couple of receivers, the one from Texas Tech, Miles Price, and then also Miles Cross, who also comes from Ohio, who is somebody I think that is somebody worth keeping an eye on because he has that built-in connection with Rourke. And I remember watching them together at Ohio. That was a very valuable connection for the Bobcats offense, and I think that familiarity will help them right away. But I do think this is a program going into the season. Like Sig said, the first thing he starts his speech with today was, we're picked to finish 17th. I know that's next to last, and that is not his intention to finish next to last. But they're down there for a reason, because they are not a program right now that I think is built to get to a bowl game this year or compete for a Big Ten title. But I do think you're going to see a much better, tougher Indiana team than you've seen the last few years.
Danny, what about Mike Locksley? I mean, it's a more than a half decade. I mean, he's going into, I believe, year 6 there with the Terps. We've seen, pretty consistent postseason appearances. What do you think we're going to see from the Terps here in 2024?
the 8-win kind of run that he's been on, I think you might see a little bit of a setback. I mean, Taulia Tagovailoa has been a presence there at quarterback that's been pretty stable. At least you knew it was going to give them. And then you would see Maryland start off really strong.
Always.
They'd come off 5-0, maybe 6-1, something like that. And then they get the heart of their Big Ten schedule, and they'd come falling back to reality. And then ended up making a bowl, going 7 or 8 wins, and kind of going there. I think it might be a little bit less than that. MJ Morris, who they're bringing into place, Taulia, it was a really awkward situation last year at NC State. Remember, he beats Miami and Clemson, but doesn't really do much in those games. And then all of a sudden, he gets his 4 games and he shuts it down and is like, no, I'm going to save this year of eligibility, when you thought maybe he would finish the season at NC State and kind of push it through there. Instead, he doesn't, and there was a lot of speculation about what was happening there. Eventually ends up here, which I think it's an offense which is pretty quarterback friendly. So I just feel like I don't know too much about MJ Morris. I think he's got some talent that he can go, but I don't know if he brings the stability. I think it could be a little bit of a bumpy year at quarterback, and I do think they'll probably be more of one of those take the checks types year where you get 6. If you make a bowl, it's a really good season, but that's probably the upside for them is 6-6.
But I will say, Mike Loxley mentioned something that we've been mentioning all week here on the Cover 3 podcast on CBS Sports Network, which is we are a team that was in the Big Ten East that, because of the new alignment with no divisions at all, has a real chance to take a step. The words he used, comfortable but confident. And he said not comfortable in terms of, willing to settle for whatever you have, but comfortable in knowing exactly who they are. The opportunity is there. The schedule only gets easier from what life was like when you had to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Michigan State, which of course was running hot from year to year every single time. So it's going to be an interesting year for Maryland, who again is in that middle where you just know 2 or 3 games are going to come down to, can MJ Morris be able to come up with the winning plays, and that'll be the difference between finishing 15th and 9th, right? Something along those lines. But PJ Fleck is a monster on the microphone. I mean, Danny, you were asking us for some public speaking tips for a couple things, events that might be coming up.
I need to go ask him.
I was listening to PJ Fleck, and he was just like, number 1, this, number 2, and he just does a great job of selling himself, his program. But Bud, what about the team? What do you think? Because we had the Gophers, they hit that 10-win mark a few seasons ago. They've been a little frisky from time to time, but it's been a couple years since we've really looked at them as a threat to the best teams in the Big Ten. What are going to be some of the things you're looking for with the Gophers?
Yeah, Chip, you're right. PJ Fleck is a beast on the microphone. What he has not been a beast at in the last 3 years is running offense. I mean, they have been relatively poor on offense since the COVID year of 2020, and last year they completely cratered. They thought Kelly McManus was going to be a guy for them. He wasn't. Now they go out to New Hampshire. They get quarterback Mac Brosmer, who was really, really successful there at New Hampshire. I love the running back Darius Taylor. Offensive line brings back 4 or 5 guys. And that offense is going to have to be a little bit better because they lost Joe Rossi, one of the best defensive coordinators in America, to the Michigan State job. But I also think the defense actually could maybe hold serve from what they were last year, because last year they were one of the worst Big Ten teams against the run because they had so many injuries. So if they can just stay a little bit healthier on defense, I'm pretty confident this offense is going to take a step forward, honestly. I like the Jackson kid they have at receiver as well. I think they're going to make a bowl. So if you're Minnesota, in the new kind of Big Ten paradigm, making a bowl, I think, is your goal. You're never going to contend for this league, in my opinion, because now you have to play all the teams from the East.
And just to absolutely spoil your sleeper for the second time today, Darius Taylor, two-way threat, right? The Alvin Kamara of the Big Ten.
He's never going to forgive you for this.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody. If you're playing college fantasy, that's going to be someone you want to look at because he's the key to the Minnesota offense. And I like the addition of Brosmer is one of those additions that doesn't flash on your radar because he came from New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. In this transfer portal era where everybody's moving around and you're constantly sliding the names around on your board, that's more traditional. The FCS guy that takes a step up and everyone says, hey, keep an eye on him. I think that could be an under-the-radar positive addition for Minnesota.
He could be the next head coach at Ohio State one day,
I was going to say,
yeah. That's right.
Quarterbacks from New Hampshire have done really well in this conference.
Yeah, Ryan Day, former New Hampshire quarterback. It could be there for you, Max. It's just in your future. Well, coming up on the other side, among the new head coaches that we have here in the Big Ten, who's got the plate set the best? Who's got the best chances to meet or exceed expectations based on what those expectations are? We'll take a look at all the new head coaches in the Big Ten and more next. back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network from Big Ten Media Days, Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. The Big Ten has 5 new hires. Yeah, we got some new schools, but we're talking about 5 new coaches in their first year at a new job. And for the purposes of our conversation, we are counting Sherrone Moore. I understand that he, led the Wolverines to very important wins against Penn State and Ohio State. But this is his first time, and he had to assemble a staff, first full season. So we've got 5 first-year coaches. We got Sherrone Moore at Michigan. We've got Jedd Fisch at Washington, Curt Cignetti at Indiana, DeShaun Foster at UCLA, and Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Danny, of these coaches, who do you think has the best chance? And we're going to say, we're grading on a curve, as they say, relative to expectations. Who do you think is set up the best to be able to have the most success?
Can I switch mine?
Yes.
No.
I might have the same. Because I wanted to go Jedd Fisch, and then I saw their win total 6.5. So that's reasonable. I think they'll be around there. But Jonathan Smith and Michigan State, the win total is 4.5. And I think they're going to go significantly over that. I think there's a chance that he does get to a bowl game. Talked to him yesterday. This guy's a culture builder. Now, his first year at Oregon State was rough. It was 2-10, I believe. I don't think you're going to see that at Michigan State. But I do think this has been a locker room, a culture that has been broken the last few years. And you talk about the want to, are they going to go out there and play hard? I think they're going to play hard for Jonathan Smith, and I think they're going to be way more competitive than people think.
I am also in on
no,
Michigan
that's fine.
State.
We don't need to if we've got 2 of us in on Michigan State, then that should tell you something. That smart people believe that Jonathan Smith will have success at Michigan State.
And I think that if you look at the situation, like you said, the win total's 4.5. It's not really high hopes for the Spartans going into 2024, but the one X factor that they have that I keep hammering home is Aiden Childs, who was an excellent get for Jonathan Smith when he was at Oregon State, who some thought had DJU and Aiden still stayed at Oregon State. There's a good chance Aiden would have taken the starting job this year anyway. He will be the unquestioned starter with Michigan State. He has a very high ceiling, and if he gets now that he's going to be able to take the reins on his own, if he can hit his ceiling and maximize his talent, this is a Michigan State team that, in a middle of this conference with a lot of wiggle room, this is a team that could take advantage of that.
Indiana, all day.
Is it because the expectations are so low and you believe
they have a higher win total than Michigan State, by the way?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I think that Indiana may win as many games as Michigan State and Washington combined.
Wow.
They have so many more winnable games than those teams do. They don't get the Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, crazy draw that some of these other teams got. They got FIU, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, Maryland, Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, and Purdue. They could win 6 or 7 of those ball games, guys. And we're going to find out, they basically portaled a Group of 5 All-Star type team.
Yes.
Now, would a Group of 5 All-Star team win the Big Ten? No, but they could go to a bowl in the Big Ten if you get the right schedule. I think this is the right schedule, as long as Curtis Rourke returns to that 2022 form.
Because Curtis Rourke from Ohio, Tom, you mentioned him earlier, dealt with injury issues. He has played through it, so he's got guts and he's got heart. But to get 100% of Curtis Rourke, you need a healthy Curtis Rourke out there. I just need to run that back so you got on record. Indiana could win as many games as Michigan State and Washington combined.
Yes.
If that doesn't happen, will you shave your beard until?
Yes.
Do I have to keep it shaved for as long as Danny kept
I know. We'll see if you can beat Danny's record of 3 days.
No, it was 3 months.
Am I crazy to point the attention and the spotlight at Sherrone Moore? I mean, even if because right now we're looking at, they're probably, what was it in the poll, third?
Third.
They could get to the Big Ten title game.
They could win the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I've
done it 3 years in a row.
I think that what Sherrone Moore is able to do, especially here in 2024, is to be able to find the things that worked so well and be able to carry them over. And it's not necessarily the offensive line. It's not necessarily what quarterback and what Kirk Campbell, the new offensive coordinator, might be able to do for whoever wins that job. It's a defense with 2 defensive tackles that are going to be able to overwhelm the offensive line more than anyone else, on the schedule, basically. I mean, how many? Let's see. Texas and Oregon are the only 2 offensive lines that you think might be able to go toe-to-toe with the combination of Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant.
And the one at the bottom of the screen.
And the one at the bottom of the screen. I mean, they took Sir Snaps a lot as a center, So
You know why we didn't pick Michigan or Sherrone Moore? Because it feels like it's cheating. Like he's not like we've already seen him on the sidelines as the head coach at Michigan, right? So he's not a true first-year head coach.
Danny, please don't put Michigan and the word cheating in the same sentence. It triggers a lot of people.
Yes, it does.
But this Michigan team, like he does have to answer the quarterback position. Yes, they lost a lot on the offensive line, and that is, as a former offensive line coach, something that he's got to build in. Tom, you always talk about how fun it was to watch that run game.
Mm-hmm.
When Michigan ran the ball, was it 30 times in a row at the end of the Penn State game? It wasn't halfback dive every single time. I mean, they do creative things that keep defenses on their heels without even having to throw the football. And I just think that that's some continuity that Jedd Fisch doesn't have. That's some continuity that Curt Cignetti doesn't have. Like, that is continuity that some of these other first-year coaches who've dealt with a lot more portal exits, even with expectations of you're going to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten, I just think that the tools are there for Sherrone Moore to be able to do that.
Yeah, this is, like I said, this is a Wolverines team that we're kind of writing off because it is an odd situation where a team that won the national title is essentially in a rebuild. But the defensive side of the ball is still elite. There are still elite players at all three levels of that unit, and they are still going to be one of the best in the conference. So if they're only giving up 10 to 13 points per game, the offense doesn't have to be elite. And their offense last year wasn't elite. It was just efficient. So as long as they can maintain that level with a new offensive line and new coaching staff and a new quarterback, this is a team that's going to be competing for a Big Ten championship appearance with the chance to win the conference.
You know what else Sherrone Moore has on his side? The disrespect card. Because Kirby Smart had to trick his players into believing there was disrespect. Saban, during their dynastic years, had to trick his players. Sherrone Moore can sit there and say, no one is picking you to win. You guys aren't even finished picking the top two, and you've won this conference 3 years in a row, coming off a national championship. I think they're going to come out with a little bit of a mental edge this season because of it.
We mentioned a lot of coaches here, and we started this hour with deserved, like, hey, DeShaun Foster is more than that moment, and I think that it was important to tell that story. But the on-field results for the Bruins might be a little bit difficult. What are the hurdles? Like, Bud, what are the hurdles that you see for UCLA? Now, and in addition to the schedule that we beat the drum on a lot, they're ping-ponging across the country like it's a tennis match. Yeah. From like a personnel standpoint, what do you think about UCLA are going to be the big challenges?
So I think a couple challenges. One, Eric Bieniemy may end up being a great hire, but it is still oftentimes a challenge to go from the NFL to coaching college kids.
Yeah.
Like, it's a new system you have to install. It was very late in the process hire, so you didn't get a lot of time with them, when that hire was made, because Chip Kelly left so late. And I think the challenge of the Big Ten, like the physicality of the Big Ten, is really going to test their depth. I think they have rather poor depth along both lines of scrimmage. So this could be a team, I could actually see them starting pretty hot, with the exception of obviously that crazy stretch of LSU, Oregon, Penn State. But if they somehow got through that, like Minnesota, Rutgers is somewhat winnable. Nebraska has a secondary we think could be a little bit suspect. If they somehow stay healthy, October could be a fun month for the Bruins. But if they don't, then Minnesota, Rutgers, and Iowa and Nebraska are extremely losable games.
So we've had this NFL to college pipeline, even though, remember, it was like, oh my gosh, all these college coaches are leaving. We've had Wink Martindale to Michigan. Now we're talking Bieniemy to UCLA. Do you guys remember what the Washington players were saying about Bieniemy? Remember, they were frustrated. He was too hard on them, and it was too detailed. Yeah. And that, to me, tells a coach that wants to be, he's going to be tough on his players, but he also is going to put on a lot on their shoulders, and he might have to pare back, which is part of that challenge that you're talking about. There still is, I don't know how enforceable it is now, but the 20-hour, rule that's supposed to be in place. And in the NFL, you can have so much more time with the players, studying, getting up to speed, getting new game plans every single week. You don't have that luxury. So I think that's something interesting to keep an eye out for. Because if he does, he's obviously got a good offensive mind. If he figures out that balance and doesn't throw too much at him, he could find some advantage schematically. That's
a great call, Danny. Eric Bieniemy, new offensive coordinator under DeShaun Foster, a lot of responsibility in front of him as well. Well, we've shown you a lot of schedules, and there have been some awesome games. So coming up on the other side, what are the Big Ten games that we are most looking forward to? We'll get into all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network from Big Ten Media Days. We've got a lot coming up. We're scheduled to have visits from Washington head coach Jedd Fisch, Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore, and Oregon head coach Dan Lanning. But before we get into a cavalcade of stars, I want to look ahead to the 2024 season as a whole. The Big Ten conference schedule, which when you bring in these big brands, the helmet matchups on the TV promotions, you get excited. Gets the juices flowing. So we're looking at our favorite Big Ten matchups ahead on the schedule. Tom, what are you looking forward to most?
Can I be basic here?
Yes!
I still think the best game on the schedule, even with all the new schools coming in, will be Michigan and Ohio State at the end of the year. It is the game I've always looked forward to the most, and it's the game I'm looking forward to the most going into this season because Ohio State, clearly the favorite to win the league. It is a stacked roster, but they've lost 3 straight to Michigan. And Michigan is a team we talked about in the last segment I still think can compete for a Big Ten title. But even if they're not, there's nothing they're going to love more at the end of the season than to get a chance to beat Ohio State and mess up Ryan Day's life. So that is always the game I'm always looking forward to.
I think it almost makes it better if Michigan underwhelmed this year and they were
Yes.
6-5, and then we talk about having to win that game. I'll be Captain Obvious, and I'll go with the Ohio State traveling out to Eugene to face the Ducks, the 2 teams that are predicted to finish top 2 in this league. It's one of the new premier matchups. It's a game that we've seen recently, too, with the Ducks going to Columbus and getting that win. So I think that game is going to be just a spectacle that we might even see a rematch of in the Big Ten championship game. But I'll be Captain Obvious and take that number 1.
I'm going to go September 21st, USC at Michigan, one of the newcomer schools. One is probably really good on offense and not so great on defense, and the other is probably the opposite. And can Michigan find a way to score enough points? Can USC block Michigan at all? That's kind of an anxiety bowl for both, by the way. The loser will be unhappy, probably more than the winner is happy. So a lot of drama on that one.
Yeah, if anybody in the tailgate is watching, and I'm sure that you all are, and if anybody knows me, you know that I'm always going to be in tune with that. Because that's right, that visit from USC to the Big House, that's going to be on CBS. It is one of the games that we already know. Lots more to come from a Big Ten on CBS package that we're very excited about. And yeah, I didn't even have to do it, bud. You just laid it out there. So of course, we will be discussing that a lot, and very excited to bring you that game on America's Most Watched Network, the Network of Stars. I'm also going to pick on USC just a little bit. There was an epic Rose Bowl a while back, about 8 years ago, and it was between Penn State and USC. And October 12th is going to be a loaded day. There's a lot of good games all across the country in all these different conferences, but do not lose track of that Penn State-USC matchup, because when you think about those teams that are not an Ohio State or an Oregon or a Michigan, those wins and losses are what are going to determine whether you are that 4th team, because Matt Rule said, I think 4 teams from the Big Ten should make the college football playoff. Mm-hmm. We, Cover 3 Podcast, has been positioning Penn State ahead of there. But if you're looking at a sleeper, Tom, and Miller Moss is able to hit, and USC is able to win that game, or maybe, surprise a Michigan, then all of a sudden you're looking at Lincoln Riley potentially being able to make a return to the college football playoff, albeit in the 12-team format. So I'm going to go with Penn State, USC, a little Rose Bowl rematch to get things going.
I've always been the cranky old man on this show when it comes to realignment and expansion in this conference. But the fact that we just listed the games we're looking forward to the most, and the only one that we've picked that was a pre-existing matchup was Ohio State and Michigan, kind of tells you what the conference was thinking of when they added these 4 schools, because they're adding a bunch of exciting new matchups to the schedule every year.
I also can't stop thinking about Danny's proposal that Michigan goes into that game, with nothing to lose.
Right.
Then you look, just a little bit tight. Oh, the stakes could be incredible. So we are very excited about that. We've got a big hour ahead. Don't go anywhere. Scheduled to have visits from Washington head coach Jedd Fisch, scheduled to be joined by Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore and Oregon head coach Dan Lanning. Some of the brightest stars from the Big Ten. They'll be joining us here on the Cover 3 Podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. All that and more next. Well, it was 2 years ago in the summer of 2022 when we first got word that USC and UCLA would be leaving the Pac-12 and joining the Big Ten. It set in motion a series of moves that has been the major conference realignment that we have seen. And then last summer, Oregon and Washington now also making the decision to leave the Pac-12 and come to join the Big Ten. It sets up the conference for an unprecedented 18-team membership. Yesterday, we were pleased to be joined by both USC head coach Lincoln Riley and UCLA head coach DeShaun Foster. And coming up here in a little bit, we will be joined by Washington coach Jedd Fisch, as well as Oregon coach Dan Lanning. All the newcomers are going to be here, and while we await Coach Fisch's arrival here at the desk, I'm going to sell his program so that he doesn't have to as much, because I'll throw this one out there. And for those of you who are longtime Big Ten fans and maybe are need a little bit of a handbook of what to look for, I'll say Husky Stadium is one of the most overlooked and underrated college football environments in the entire country.
1,000% agree. I mean, the way that the stadium is built, the acoustics of it, it is one of the loudest places you'll go to in the country, even if it is not capacity-wise up there with like a Penn State or a Michigan or Ohio State with 100,000 people in there. It sounds like there's 120,000 people in there. And plus, it's beautiful and scenic because you're right there on the water with the sailgating scene.
I took an official visit to Washington.
That's
Loved
right.
it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Damon Heward was my host.
Okay.
You sell the program, I'll sell Jedd Fisch. And I think that's one of the reasons he's running just a little bit behind. It's because he's such a good talker, such a good personality. Like, everybody keeps him a little bit longer. Like, some interviews get cut short. So you're like, all right, there's just cliches and everything. But he's a great personality. I think it's a reason why he's been on this rocket ship, just kind of climbing the coaching ladder every step of the way. And now he's here in the premier, one of the premier conferences at a great program that's just coming off a national championship game. He's likable. He's referenced he has a true rebuild. And he's not shied away from that, realizing that they did lose a lot from last season. So I think he knows what he's getting into, but if there's anybody that's built for the challenge, it's him.
I want rain. I want hoodies. I want loud sounds. Like, that's kind of what I want.
It probably is one of the more underrated stadium environments in the country.
Right.
Yes. It just is. It's phenomenal.
The other thing about Washington is that the ceiling was not just what we saw last year with Kalen DeBoer and Michael Penix. This is a program that has competed for national championships. This is a program that, when it gets running hot, can be right up there with anybody else in the country. It might be a little distance from that now, but I feel like you can just look at Washington's history. You don't have to go back. I mean, there are other schools that claim pre-World War II titles.
Right.
You don't have to go back to pre-World War II to be able to find where Washington sits among the best college football programs in the country.
Yeah, well, they got to the title game last year, and they did that under Kalen DeBoer, but it wasn't that long before that. To your point, Chris Peterson got Washington to the college football playoff. This is a program that comes into the league and will be one of the annual playoff contenders for the Big Ten. We've talked about how we expect there to be 4 Big Ten teams in the playoff. Year in and year out, Washington is going to be in the conversation. Maybe not this season, but for most seasons, they will be in the conversation of being one of those teams, if they don't win the league, to get an at-large berth, because there is the stadium, there is the buy-in. It is a school that wants to win at football and wants to be successful, and that is such a huge part, and they have that.
So we're good teammates, right?
We are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we don't sell out Bud and tell him his quote about the win totals and his predicted win finish, right? We
Right.
keep that under wraps, right? We want to keep everything friendly here on the show.
There's a reason Bud's not on the desk right now.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're getting word we will soon be joined by Washington head coach Jedd Fisch. So coming up on the other side, what is ahead as the Huskies look to their first year in the Big Ten? We'll get into all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Pleased to be joined by Washington coach Jedd Fisch. Now, Coach, the timing of the arrival was a little bit later than a lot of the coaching carousel. The way that these dominoes fall, sometimes that happens. But your experience of understanding Washington was there. This was a program that you competed against. So what was your view of the Washington football program from the outside that really informed you wanting to make the move?
Yeah, it was certainly a challenge because it was January 15th or 16th, somewhere in that range. So the portal was closed. You're already started with your team. You've already had team meetings talking about the next season, talking about what you want to accomplish in spring football. And then this happened with Coach Saban, domino effect, right? So I was fortunate enough that we played Washington the last 3 years that I was at Arizona, played Washington when I was at UCLA. So had 4 games against them, and I understood what University of Washington was. And 2021, they had a down year at 4-8, and then saw what they did in the last 2 years after that with the same team, and just kept them together and got better and better and better, and felt like we had 2 great games against them. So I knew how good Washington could be. I knew they were just coming off a national championship. You couldn't ask for a better setup in terms of hitting a team when they're hot. And then, the team changed. But we now have this. The program is in a great spot, and it was a chance to join the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think back to when you first took the Arizona job. You were inheriting a program that had gone winless the season before in the COVID season, and it was a rebuild. And now you're in a situation where it's rare. Washington was in the title game last year, but it's kind of another rebuild. How are you comparing the situations, and with your experience at Arizona, how is that preparing you for what you've got to do here?
I call it more of a reboot here.
Oh, okay.
Because I think when you're in a rebuild, you really are laying foundation, and then you're going one step at a time and trying to teach a team that doesn't know how to win. When we're in a reboot, meaning we don't have the team we had. 21 and 22 starters are gone, and we have no returning starters on offense, and we kind of have a smorgasbord of players from all different places. But we hit that reboot button because University of Washington knows how to win. And guys that were on this team, the 38 scholarship players that are back, they know what it feels like to win 25 to 28 games. The 12 guys that came to us from Arizona, they know what it feels like to win 10 games and be on a 7-game win streak. So my hope is that we're rebooting a little bit. We know it's not necessarily where it would be if we had a bunch of 5th and 6th year players, 13 of which are in the NFL right now. But we also know that Washington has such a strong brand that we should be able to get it started quicker.
Most important position in the game, you got somebody with a lot of experience. Will Rogers comes in after an illustrious career in the SEC, so you're getting that. How much of an advantage of that is at least knowing somebody that's been out there in the spotlight and has been able to perform at a high level?
Yeah, the big thing with Will is coach's kid, right, which is so big, right? Second thing is that 40 starts, and not just 40 starts anywhere, right? 40 starts, and in those starts, it's Alabama, it's Tennessee, it's Florida, it's Auburn, it's Georgia. So the experience that he has of being an SEC quarterback, the experience he has to play in 2 different systems, Mike Leach's system and then his system he played in last year. This is now going to system 3. But he has that ability to really understand football. He has the ability to be very efficient. He's a very high completion percentage guy. And what we just want to do is continue to use his brain and his football acumen to our advantage.
Can you take us into the process of hiring Steve Belichick as your defensive coordinator and the person, right? Because we sometimes at the New England Patriots organization, you get so fascinated with the figurehead up top, you don't always get to know all the different pieces. So, what have you seen from him? Any good Steve Belichick stories so far from the time y'all have spent together?
Yeah, well, I would say this. We were able to bring 21 staff members with us from Arizona. And our whole offensive staff, special team staff, our strength staff, our training staff, and our defensive staff, we brought 2 of the 5 guys. And we brought John Richardson and Jason Kafusi. And I knew that I wanted to hire an NFL defensive coordinator.
Okay.
I worked with Steve before when I was coaching for the Patriots. So there was 5 or 6 guys that I reached out to that were in the NFL that I thought would be candidates for this coordinator job. Steve was the one that I felt like if I could get him, he was going to be the guy. I just didn't know. He was going to wait to see if his dad took a job. He was going to wait to see what else happened in New England. So he was kind of in a holding pattern. I was in a holding pattern. But I really felt, and I kept telling our players, and we lost some players in transition because they didn't know who our defensive coordinator was going to be. And I kept saying, I'm not going to rush it, but trust me when I tell you, you'll be happy with who I get. The guys that stayed were happy. And Steve is he's a great person. He's a great worker. He's like his dad, that he's a great listener. And I was able to bring him and Vinny Sinceri, both from New England. Yep. And then we were able to hire Robert Bala from Alabama to be our linebacker coach. So that's our staff. So our staff is really consists of everyone that we had. And then we added 2 Patriots and a guy from Bama. And I felt really good that we were going to be patient on defense and hire the 3 guys that I really felt were going to be best for our team.
Real quick on a follow there. So why'd you say NFL defensive coordinator? How was that the starting point for you?
Yeah, Michigan.
Yeah.
If you look at what Michigan did, Coach Harbaugh and I are very close. I talked to Coach Harbaugh about it, and he felt like when he made that transition to Mike McDonald and then Jesse Minter, that he really felt like they had a competitive advantage. And then you look at what UCLA did last year when Chip hired Danton Lynn. They all of a sudden became a top 10 defense.
Yep.
And then so you start looking around and you start saying, okay, these NFL Al Golden and Notre Dame top 10 defense came from the Bengals. So you start looking at what's working right now. Now the good part is none of them are running the Patriots defense. So they can all run the Ravens defense and we'll run the Patriots defense. But I felt that was what it was for me, and that's why I wanted to do that.
We've talked a little bit about this, and I'm curious to know what advice you've given to Steve about the difference in, NFL, you've got them all day, you've got them from 7 in the morning till 5 at night, you have all this time. Do you tell them to be careful, be cautious, pare it back? Like, what's the approach between, and I get that college players are becoming more professional, but they still do have other requirements. What do you tell them as far as what they can handle?
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation of realizing not only is it what they can handle, but you're also defending a lot of different stuff in college football. There's not as much, there's unbalanced isn't something they do in the league. As you know, they're not going to run a lot of X motion. They're not going to sit there and be in wide splits with no, pass blockers other than the 5. You're not going to see that. So I've told Steve, you're going to see a lot of different offense, and you're going to have less time with them. So what we have to do is just be really good at fundamentals. The beautiful thing about Steve and about that system that his dad and Parcells created was that it's about the fundamentals. If you watch the Patriots on defense, they're the best tacklers in the NFL, period. If you watch them on defense, they play with their hands better than everybody else. They're gap sound. They do their job. So do less, but do that is kind of what we talk about.
So we're here at Media Days, which to me has always been kind of like the de facto starting point for the season. It means it's right around the corner. As you're getting ready for week 1, what's the thing you're seeing with your team right now that has you the most excited for this season to get started?
They're coming together. They're coming together culturally. They're coming together off the field. They scheduled a dinner on their own at some Japanese hibachi steakhouse the other night. They had a barbecue at one of the players' houses. 5 of them took out boats and they packed 8, 10, 12.
Yeah, we won't tell Coast Guard about that.
On the boats. They grill every Saturday after their lifts. Those are the things that we needed to do. We're like, I always say we're like a Mother's Day buffet, this football team. You got lamb chops and omelets going on at the same time. So we have to grab from 12 different universities. Our team, last year our team is built from guys that played at 12 different schools. So we've got to get them together, and we got to get them close fast. So we're going to spend a lot of time, what we call mind time, during training camp, where we get to know each other better and see how close we can become as a team.
He is Jedd Fisch, head coach of the Washington Huskies. Jedd, thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Cover 3 podcast.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Coach.
Coming up on the other side, we will turn our attention to the reigning champion, the Michigan Wolverines, joined by Sam Webb of 24/7 Sports. All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, here at Big Ten Media Days. And Bud, you are a champion of the summer of the Cover 3 podcast. Anybody in the tailgate knows that, and if you're not subscribed, then please do subscribe to the Cover 3 podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. But summer school is such an important part of our programming in the summer. So, Bud, I got to ask, we've got a guest here. Why don't you introduce us to Mr. Webb?
Michigan fans on Twitter, I told you we'd have a surprise. Sam Webb, the Michigan Insider, he is back. And we don't usually do summer school live because I like to edit that thing down, but my man Sam's he's been the goods on Michigan the last 3 years, like the most accurate guy out there. Let's do it live, man. Let's do summer school.
Let's go.
All right, so Sherrone is taking over. Jim Harbaugh off to the NFL. Obviously, like if you listen to him talk on the podium, he says a lot of the same phrases that his mentor Harbaugh said. How will he want to run this program differently?
I don't think he's going to reinvent the wheel. I think if he learned anything, I think it's that when you are in the fire, you got to adapt. I think that when you get in the Penn State game, I think there was a lesson to be learned that he applied later in the season. They got in that game, bud, and they couldn't block those guys. Mm-hmm. And so when you can't block them, you got a plan. You remember that saying Mike Tyson had, everyone has a plan until you get hit? Mm-hmm. And he realized in that moment the plan they had going into that game wasn't going to work. And so there were some tools that they unveiled in that game on the fly that you go to the championship or the Rose Bowl game against Alabama that he pulled out again, that they needed in the crunch time to win the game. And so I think you'll see him employ the same sort of strategies this year where they got a plan heading into the season who they think he didn't say who he thinks his quarterback is going to be, but I think in their mind they think who their quarterback is going to be. But if they get in the season and it's not like that, I think they are going to adapt and be able to have a game plan that works.
In their mind, starting now, is that Guy Orji?
I think so. Listen, he has difference-making talent, difference-making athleticism. Now, does that translate to difference-making play? I don't know. It's very much like Jalen Milroe. Mm-hmm. You get into the season last year at Alabama, and they get in the game too much like Michigan against Texas, and he was making mistakes that they couldn't live with in the moment, and they benched him. Now, that didn't wreck their season because he had the mental makeup to not be wrecked by that. Michigan needs to make a decision. If it winds up being Alex Orji, does he have mistakes that they can live with, that they can coach him through? Because if you bench him, you could wreck him, and then now he can't recover, and maybe you don't have the same kind of season that Alabama had. That's something they're going to have to get right with as a coaching staff.
So the only thing we see is what they use Orji on TV, which is just a wildcat, which makes sense. Like, if you got a guy to throw the passes, the guy that went like 5th overall to the Vikings would make some sense. Let McCarthy throw him. But what did you hear behind the scenes about Orji's passing ability?
So he knows the offense. Let's just start there. It is not about aptitude. It is not about IQ. It is not about knowing where to go with the football. He can process defenses. He can read them on the fly. It is all about mechanics. It is all about process. He didn't have the quarterback tutelage that a lot of other guys had coming in. So they have had to do that from the ground up. That is what Kirk Campbell is about. This is what he does, right?
It's like
so
his passion
being
project.
put to the table, being put on the table. So we'll see if he's able to grow him up. This season is not a runway. It's an aircraft carrier. Your game 2 against Texas. Can you grow him up fast enough in those mechanics so he can execute the short and intermediate game consistently enough where his running skills really come to the fore? Because if you look at them offensively, what they'll tell you is they aren't going to bring out a new offensive package. They're going to emphasize different aspects of the offensive game plan that they already had, that they didn't run as much with JJ. You saw it in flashes. You're going to see it in waves with Alex Orji if he winds up being a quarterback.
You mentioned it earlier that Sherrone learned the lessons from that Penn State game because they couldn't block. There's an entirely new offensive line on this team in 2024. What are you hearing? What have you seen about how that unit is gelling going into the season?
Yeah, so they're a unit that has they have starts, but not a lot of starts together. They're cobbling together guys who have been, like Josh Preeb, he started a lot of games in Northwestern. You go out and you put together a guy like Giovanni Ohadi, started a lot of games at Michigan a couple of years ago. I mean, you got Miles Hinton started a lot of games at Stanford. So you can piece a lot of starts, but The gelling of it is going to take some time. This is why I talk about runway for the season. They gotta get them together and let them live through some mistakes and hope that it happens fast enough so this running game can get them to a point where your quarterback can grow up. I think they're going to be fine because you can help tackles that where I think is the biggest hole, and you got a running back that defenses have to account for, and I think that is going to be something that helps open up the running game.
We just had Washington coach Jedd Fisch up here, and he said that for hiring his defensive coordinator, who of course ended up being Steve Belichick, the starting point was, I want to hire an NFL defensive coordinator, and some of the inspiration for that was talking with Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh pointed to Mike McDonald, he pointed to Jesse Minter, and of course now Michigan is staying in that mold with an NFL defensive coordinator hire in Wink Martindale. Aside from the absolute game wreckers in the middle of that defensive line, what should we expect from Michigan's defense under new leadership?
Again, you're talking about it's the same tree. It's not just going to the NFL. You go to the guy that Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter learned from. They learned from Wink Martindale. So it's in essence his scheme. Now they put their own spin on it, and there's, I think, some fear and concern that maybe his aggression on the back end,
the blitzes,
is maybe a little out of character for this defense. What Wink will tell you is, listen, I played to the personnel that I had with the teams that I was on. At Michigan, I mean, this secondary, the things that they do, I wasn't doing with my NFL guys. I mean, they can do more. And look at the defense, the line they have up front, the game records they have up front. Maybe I don't have to blitz as much. So I can vary my approach. I can vary my attack. I'm not going to come in here and be Don Brown. So I think you're going to see a lot of the same with some spin. The biggest question for Michigan is not about approach. The biggest question for Michigan defensively is, will they have the depth that they had the past couple of years? That's the secret sauce. They could go 2-3 deep. Their first string, to me, if it's not the best in the country, it's arguably there. It's right up there. It's once you get to the second and third string, are they as good? That's what we have to wait to see.
Defensively on the front seven, could they be better than they were last year?
They could be.
Okay.
Wow.
They could be. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are the best defensive tackle tandem in Michigan history.
Yes.
Ja'Shawn Barham bench pressed a first-round pick into the backfield in the Rose Bowl. Derek Moore is an outstanding defensive end on the other side, and Ja'Shawn Barham I thought was a 5-star pickup in the portal, and they're gonna use him in different ways. He's not just gonna be at the second level. They're gonna bring him off the edge. He's gonna line up in the middle. He's gonna be a chess piece at the second level, and Will Johnson is an All-American. I mean, they have the tools to be better, which is crazy to say when you're losing a guy like Mike Sainristil, right? So that's another thing that gives them a little bit of leeway on offense. You got a defense that can give you a cushion. So can they grow that offense up fast enough is the question that is facing this team.
Going back to the offense, Donovan Edwards has gotten a lot of shine this offseason. He had a great performance in the title game. He's on the cover of the video game. But Blake Corum was the workhorse of this offense the last few years. Is Donovan going to be kind of stepping into that 30-carry-a-game role, or is there Kalel Mullings or somebody else going to be carrying the workload like that?
You're paying attention. You're paying attention. So Donovan, this has been a journey for him. He has God-given talent. We watched him on this field. I think I might have talked to Bud about it on Cover 3 a couple of years ago. I watched him make one of the most unbelievable runs ever. He's running a split zone going to this end zone. And this guy, he has 5 yards play side. It is wide open. It is clearly blocked. And he cuts back a split zone into 2 unblocked defenders and runs through 6 guys to the end zone. And I was like, what did you see? And he said, I saw a touchdown. I said, it's impossible that you saw a touchdown doing that. And he said, so what did you see? He said, well, I'm going for touchdowns every time. Well, that's not what Blake Corum does, right?
No.
Blake Corum is taking the 5 yards and getting 50 when it's there. And so that was what Donovan wasn't doing. And it would get him in trouble sometimes. So last year, he's thinking, hey, man, this is going to be my year. But Blake comes back. And Donovan has an offseason where he's hurt heading into the season. So that sets him back. So you have all this adversity heading into the season. He's not living up to expectations. Blake is there. He's not getting all the carries he wants, and it's in his head. And so now he has to get right with, how do I find my place? And it wasn't until the end of the season where he got out of his own head, and then he started to think about how can I best contribute to this team. And what he realized is, listen, let me start working within the framework of the play. And the textbook example of that was his first touchdown in the national championship game. It was an inside zone play. And if you remember, he runs into the back of his blocker. He's pressing the hell out of that A-gap. I'm going to press this A-gap if it kills me. So much that he runs into the back of his blocker. But what happens? He gets a touchdown out of it, right? So I think he has gotten to the point where he realizes, like, look, man, I'm going to take what the play gives me, and something special can come out of that because I got special talent. And you saw it in the spring game, and I think that's something that you'll see more and more as he gets into this season.
Getting that Pop Warner out of his game, so to speak.
Absolutely.
It took a minute. Sam, how much does the quarterback decision, is that related to what they have at receiver? Like, would you go with a better thrower if they had better receivers to throw to?
They're all 6 feet 180.
They went and got a Marion Walker back. I think to me the question was, did you go and get some guys on the perimeter that make defenses respect the speed down the field more than the size?
Sure.
Do teams think you have someone that can run by them? Because I don't think that Michigan had guys on the roster where they felt like teams would respect that. Marion Walker, Fred Moore, I think you're going to see them throw up a couple times in the first game just to show that, right?
Play action over the top stuff.
To me, again, the question becomes, can you make the short and intermediate plays enough where teams respect it? Because I think Alex Orji, if you look back at what was really ailing them, they couldn't run the football early last year. That, to me, was the issue. Teams have figured out a way to shut down some of their staple run plays. Michigan couldn't get outside. Illinois had written the book. Teams like East Carolina was shutting them down. And they started putting reads on some of their base run plays, reads on counters, reads on duos, right? It was unbelievable. Now, all of a sudden, they can run the football. You put Alex Orji in that situation, eureka. Now you can really do some things. But he has got to be able to hit some short and intermediate play, just enough, not like J.J. McCarthy,
just to keep him honest.
To keep him honest. So he doesn't have to be J.J. McCarthy throwing the football. Just be consistent enough, because the other things in the run game that you can do can be difference making. So that's the key. Can he do the passing game consistently enough to make them respect you? And if you can, Michigan can't have an offense that can have them right there.
He is Sam Webb, the Michigan Insider, 24/7 Sports, one of the best in the business when it comes to covering the Wolverines. And coming up on the other side, we will be joined by Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, talking about the Ducks' first year in the Big Ten and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, and Oregon rolls deep, baby. I mean, this is the absolute way to announce your arrival to the Big Ten, because we had the big old inflatable duck, and our next guest, Ducks head coach Dan Lanning, said at the microphone, you want to take it to every single road game.
How would that look?
Hey, I want to see it. Our friend Robbie Cowan said we want to see it in a cornfield in Nebraska. You go play the Cornhuskers, and we'll figure out a way to put it out there. Dan, this is such an exciting year for Oregon football, and I think that it is not just the conference transition, but I think the evidence of what Oregon has been in your first 2 years at the helm. The sense that you're not even knocking, you're beating on that door, that there's a step that's ahead. Inside the locker room with some turnover, with some new faces out of high school, new faces through the portal. Is continuity a thing when it comes to the success year over year?
Certainly. I think, the continuity of understanding expectations and how we do things, I think all those things really matter. And then the ability to onboard guys quickly as you join some guys that you want to make an impact in your program. So it's constantly moving in college football. And I think we've kind of found that balance for our team, whether it's player-led leadership, what the expectations are on the field, but also how do you get some guys that are just joining to recognize those expectations.
You're still a young coach.
There's Gray showing up, man.
I've been told coaching will do that.
Yeah, at least we're not his way.
How have you continued to evolve personally as a coach? Like when you self-evaluate, what changes or tweaks have you made to your style of coaching or even your approach just in totality?
Yeah, I always talk about quality of experience as opposed to quantity. And for me, I've had some great quality of experience before I got to sit in the seat. And now, after 2 years, there's a lot of things you learn, about yourself and where you want to improve. And I think you have to go back and assess, okay, why did this situation go wrong or right? How could you handle it differently? I've certainly done a lot of that this offseason and the season before. But I don't think it's one thing. As a coach, if you're not learning, you're falling behind. So always looking for an edge. Whether I didn't used to read books, now I kind of read books. Like that's something I gotta figure out if I can get an edge in an area. Visiting with other coaches, professional development. That's been a lot of fun for me to pick people's brains.
You making your players read books too? Did I hear Art of War was like the assignment? How do you make sure they're reading it?
So it's more about we're going to pull excerpts out of the book and they're going to go through these excerpts. We do study sessions on some of those pieces and try to make sure they walk away with the theme, right? What's the theme of this and how does it relate to us and our process?
We're going to ask you about the transfers in a minute, but I want to talk to you first about some of the homegrown guys that you guys had in your program and developed. Like, who are some of the people that the Big Ten folks back home that they should know about, first-time starters who are about to emerge for you guys?
Yeah, that's always a hard question. I know you guys are like, give me every name. And here's the reality is I don't know what this season will look like. Now, certainly we've had some guys like Josh Connerly, Tatum Tuioti, or guys that are from the Pacific Northwest that made an impact for us last season, see them making even a bigger role this next year. And there's a lot of guys in our program that are like in that category that are from kind of our footprint and have done a great job. But it's certainly any of those guys would tell you the same thing. They're not the one piece that makes that thing happen.
There is a consistency that I understand you want to see from, and this is a on-field, off-field. You talk about the study sessions. There seems to be a holistic approach to everything that you want from your guys on and off the field. What do you think the modern, high-level college football player needs? What kind of guidance do they need as young people are changing, every single year? How do the messages have to be a little bit different?
Yeah, what do they not need? There's a lot, right? Yeah. And I think the first thing is figuring out how you can clear out the outside noise, right? Because the best way to step forward for yourself is to make sure you're self-aware. So it's our job to help our guys become self-aware. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do they need to lean into, right? And then how do you actually make a change in that? Scrolling through your Twitter or your Instagram is not going to make you a better football player.
Sure.
That's not going to create growth, right? So what things can you do and create consistent habits to actually develop yourself as a player and a person? And those are the things that we want to try to model for those guys.
I got to talk to Dylan earlier today. Super impressive young man. He's obviously had a ton of success, at other places. Now he comes in. Something I'm still having trouble wrapping my mind around is how you step in and become a leader like right away. And that's what you need your quarterback to do, and you can't fake it. How has he stepped into that role as kind of being, because you have to be as a quarterback. How has he fit in that role and kind of evolved in a continuous process, I'm sure?
Well, I think the thing that Dylan's done a great job of is he recognized there's steps to that, and how quickly can he accomplish those steps. He didn't come in the first day and step on the practice field and start yelling at everybody, your route's at the wrong depth. Like, that wasn't his approach. His approach was, I'm going to go connect with these players. He did an offensive retreat with a lot of our offensive guys. He has guys over to his house for a meal. He's finding that time to connect with guys first. And, I hope what we see and what grows throughout the rest of the season is some more vocal leadership. This is really similar to what Bo's process was when he first got here. So he's handled it extremely well. I know this is going to be a fun season for him.
What's the next step for your defense to take?
Yeah, we were better last year than we were the year before, so I would tell you get better the next year. What's that look like? In critical moments, we can improve in third down, improve in the red area. I think if you have a great rush defense, that's going to equate to a great defense. I always laugh when guys are like, well, our pass defense is really good, and that means the rush defense sucks, right? Or vice versa. Scoring defense, that matters, right? How many points you give up a game. Explosive plays, right? An ability to get off the field and third down in the red area is really important. So those are the areas that we really want to attack.
You're a great motivator. You bring a lot of energy. Your pregame speech before Colorado goes viral. I'm curious to know about the process of the pregame speech. Are they planned? Do you have a couple notes that you kind of take? Is it spur of the moment? What's your approach in that pregame mentality that gets these guys so hyped?
Yeah, generally, every single week we kind of have a theme of, what's the difference maybe in us and our opponent, something we might think is an edge. So it's not something that just started that day of the game. We're thinking about going into that week of, okay, if we do these things, what will that equate to on the field? And certainly, that's a moment that became a big moment for everyone else, but it's similar every single week in that locker room for us.
Do you think the Oregon Ducks will be back on this field on CBS in early December playing for a Big Ten title in their first year?
that is certainly our goal.
He wanted a guarantee. He wanted a guarantee.
Yeah.
He wants that viral clip.
You guys are fighting for moments here. Are we capable of it?
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? We have to go play ball games to get there, and you can't look at that until you focus on what's right in front of you.
Yeah, I guess I'm going for clicks, right? I'm the one going for
shamelessly, too.
Yeah, he is Dan Lanning, head coach of the Oregon Ducks. Dan, thanks so much for spending some time here with us on the Cover 3 podcast. Best of luck this season.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Coming up on the other side, joined by Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore, looking ahead at the season for the reigning champs. Next.
Appreciate it.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, and boy, we are honored to be joined by the head coach of the Michigan Wolverines, the reigning champs, the three-time Big Ten champs, Sherrone Moore. Coach, thank you so much for taking some time with us. It's a new role here at Media Days, but certainly, a lot of familiarity with what you're doing in Ann Arbor. How's the day been so far?
It's been awesome. Excited to talk to the different outlets and really just talk about our players. Just give me another outlet to talk about our players and our team, and ready for camp next Wednesday.
So you're starting next Wednesday. This is your first camp as the head coach, but you do have head coaching experience from last season. But what's been the biggest change for you this offseason now that you are in charge of the day-to-day and you are captaining the ship?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me is that I'm not in those offensive meetings and heading those offensive meetings talking about scheme 24/7. And aligning just our offense. It's the whole team. And it's the whole team. It's offense, defense, special teams, but it's recruiting. It's the support staff. It's equipment. It's training room. So for me, it's making sure everybody in the building sees the vision that we want to live by and continue to do that.
You mentioned you want to talk about the players, and obviously y'all are a developmental program. You lost a lot to the NFL, which is to your credit. Who are some of the newcomers that we should know for Michigan this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the guys, obviously everybody knows Donovan Edwards, Makari Page, Max Burson. They know Will Johnson, Colston Max, and Kenneth Grant. But guys like TJ Guy, super excited for him. Ernest Hausman played a good role last year, but played an even bigger role this year. Guys like Jair Hill, excited for him at the corner spot, and the other guys, Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson, who came over from UNLV, different guys there. But on the offensive side, Marlon Klein is a guy that people are going to be talking about a lot. He's going to play behind Colston and Max, but he's a raw athlete that might be the most athletic of all the guys on the team. And offensive line, excited to watch them gel. Miles Hinton's played a lot of games. Josh Preby's played a lot of games. Excited to see who wins the job at center, and the list goes on and on about guys. And Samaj Morgan made a big push last year, especially at the end of the year, and then ready to watch his running mate Frederick Moore and Kendrick Bell do some really big things, and then Amarion Walker's back on offense now, so super excited for him.
So one of your first challenges, one of your first tasks was assembling a staff, and that kind of came in stages as trying to figure out where everybody was going to be. What were you looking for when it came to making those hires, particularly at the two coordinator positions, offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator?
Yeah, number one, I wanted great people. People that really cared about the vision of our players, the university, and put that first. And then great teachers, and then the next piece is, the schemes had to be a fit. And for me, from an offense perspective, Kurt Campbell was a no-brainer. Great story about Kurt is we win the national title and we come home and everybody's celebrating. You win the natty, you're partying. And we get home and I go in the office to go get something, and he's yelling at the TV because somebody's route depth wasn't right. I'm like, dude, you got to go home. And at that point, I was like, man, this is our OC. Yeah. This is our guy. And I already knew, because I'd shared a room with him for 2 years and knew the detail of how he loved football, how he wanted it to be, how he wanted it to look, and knew that I wanted that to be the guy. And from a defense perspective, our defense has been pretty good. And statistically, last year was the best defense in the country. So for me, I wanted to make sure I kept that consistent and bringing in somebody that knew it, but that could put their own twist on it. And Coach Martindale, lucky enough for us, both of the previous coordinators coached under Wink. So for us, it was a great fit, and he's a great person, a great leader, and the players love him.
So no changes in smash. Kurt still going to bring it.
I mean, I don't think Kurt's going to yell smash. I'll still take care of that, but he'll have his own twist on the offense for sure.
You mentioned all the time you spent before you were head coach discussing paying attention to scheme, I just want to say I've been talking about it on this show for a couple of years. I absolutely love watching your run game and what you've been doing with that offense the last few years. It's one of the more exciting, fun offenses I've seen.
Thank you.
But now that you're no longer running the offense, what have you still seen? Because I know your background, you're an offensive line coach.
Yep.
You understand that, and you have a big overhaul on that unit. You said you still don't know who the starter is going to be at center. There's going to be a lot of new names up front. What have you seen so far in this offseason that's got you excited for what to expect from the Michigan offensive line?
Yeah, I look at it in a more positive mindset than we were in 2020 to 21. In 2020, obviously, we didn't have a great season. In 21, we started a lot of young guys. Trevor Keegan, Zach Zinner were sophomores. Ryan Hayes was an older guy. Andrew Vastardis was an older guy. Andrew Stuber was an older guy, but the other two guys were sophomores. And other guys, Carson Barnhart played as a sophomore. So it's kind of in the same realm where we have some guys that have played and some guys that haven't played and guys that have experience are ready to go. And I've seen this summer, those guys really push each other and really push the D-line. And I feel like we have arguably the best defensive line in the country. So when they're pushing them on a daily basis, that really makes you a better unit.
If this was the NFL, they would totally have vetoed a trade in which you guys get DeShaun from Maryland to add to the front seven, right? Like that. In what world is that fair?
He's a beast.
How do you guys go? I mean, ones versus ones in practice. How tough is that to block your own front seven?
I mean, they're a pain in the butt. They were a pain in the butt last year, and we had a really good experienced offensive line. And there's some days like they just wreck practice. And we're like, man, these dudes are unbelievable. And it was crazy because my older guys were like, man, are we going to be any good? Like, right, can we block these dudes? And then we'd have our day, and then they'd have their day. And it would go back and forth. But that's what you want, because if one side is consistently beating the other, you're probably not going to have a good team. So there's a lot of good give and take. But it's awesome to watch our defense because they don't give up any inches to our offense. They're not saying, oh, we're rated this or we're that. Like, we just automatically going to come in and win. No, they work. They work really, really hard to the point that offensively, defensively, kind of had to tone these guys back to, hey, guys, we still got to get to camp. Mm-hmm. Like, we were in summer training, and I'm watching them do something on June 3rd. I'm like, guys, we got training camp in 2 months. Calm down. Like, we got to get to there. So our guys are chomping at the bit and ready to go.
If you want to break the news of who your starting quarterback is on the show right now, we would love for you to do that.
Yeah, not going to do that, but that's okay.
How's the competition going? What are you seeing? What are you liking so far?
I mean, it's been outstanding. The coolest thing about it is that every one of them support each other in every way, and it's not a vindictive, vicious competition, but it's like, okay, whoever's going to help us win, that's who we want to be there. And all the guys have been awesome. They've done everything they can to this point to be successful, and now, the pads and the decisions, have to be made on the fly, and you're gonna have a play clock. Plays get ran in. You're gonna get guys running at you. You're gonna have Mason Graham and Kenneth Graham running at your face, and you gotta make a decision. Are you gonna throw a pick? You're gonna throw a touchdown? You're gonna dirt it? You're gonna check down? All those different things are gonna happen, and we're gonna see in real life time who's gonna be the guy. So just excited for that competition to take place.
One last one here. What is the most important factor in maintaining a standard of championship contention that has been set over the last couple of years at Michigan?
Yeah, I think our process in which we do everything. How you do one thing is how you do everything. I think Coach Jay Tress has done an unbelievable job taking over Ben Herbert and the strength staff. All his support, what he's done has been phenomenal. They're with them on a daily basis, so watching them work in the weight room has been a motivation to me. Makes me want to get up in the morning, which I do now, and work out every morning because I see those guys and how they do it and how they work, but how they line their shoes, how everything's aligned in the weight room and our nutrition staff, our training staff, how they were attacking the summer. So our process of how we do things will allow us to be successful in the season.
He is Sherrone Moore, head coach of the reigning national champion Michigan Wolverines. Sherrone, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the Cover 3 podcast.
Appreciate it. Go Blue.
We want to thank everybody for all of their support here at Big Ten Media Days. And if you liked what you saw, oh, buddy, we got a lot coming your way on the Cover 3 podcast. We are live Monday, Wednesday, Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can join us at youtube.com/Cover3. You can listen to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can scan that QR code on the screen. Guys, we're making it easy for you to come and join the tailgate. Cover 3 podcast. Download wherever you get your podcasts.